My name is Hannah Ross. At 29, I own a multi-million-dollar marketing firm, but 11 years ago, my mother slapped me and threw me out for refusing an arranged marriage to a man twice my age. I left home in the pouring rain with nothing but a backpack and my college acceptance letter. Today, I returned on my private jet with my 5-year-old daughter by my side. The look on my parents' faces was worth every sleepless night and tear-stained pillow. This is my story of betrayal, survival, and building an empire on the ashes of the life they tried to force on me. My name is Hannah Ross. Today, as I stepped off my private jet with my daughter's tiny hand gripping mine, I felt the weight of 11 years lift off my chest, like a storm finally passing. The July sun hit my face as I adjusted my sunglasses and looked out over the familiar landscape of my hometown. From this small regional airport, I could already see the tops of the pine trees that lined the road I used to take to high school. The distant steeple of the old white church where my mother forced me to attend Sunday services in frilly dresses and patent leather shoes that pinched my feet. It felt like a lifetime ago, and in many ways it was. 11 years ago, I walked away from this town with nothing but a tattered backpack containing 3 pairs of clothes, a toothbrush, and my acceptance letter to UC Berkeley hidden carefully in a folder marked chemistry notes. So my mother wouldn't find it. I still remember the feel of the rain soaking my thin summer dress, the cold bite of the wind against my burning cheek where she had slapped me. I remember how my tears blurred the yellow glow of streetlights as I walked toward the bus station that night, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Because here's the thing. My mother didn't just slap me. She didn't just call me ungrateful, a disgrace, a failure, and a disappointment. She didn't just threaten to ruin my life if I ever embarrassed her again. She threw me out of our house, the only home I had ever known, because I refused to marry Marcus Hale, a man 15 years older than me, recently divorced, with cold blue eyes that never smiled. To her, Marcus was my golden ticket, the heir to a real estate fortune with country club memberships and political aspirations. To me, he was a nightmare waiting to happen. I was 18. I was supposed to be choosing my college major, hanging posters in my dorm room, staying up late, eating ramen with friends. Instead, I found myself standing alone in the rain, with nowhere to sleep, no money, except what I had saved from babysitting, and no family willing to take me in. Except for Sophia, my best friend since 5th grade, who drove through the storm at midnight in her dented Honda Civic to pick me up from the bus stop. Her parents let me sleep on their couch for weeks while I scrambled to enroll in community college, working 3 jobs to stay afloat. And now, 11 years later, I was back. Not as a broken girl in soaked clothes, but as the CEO of my own multi-million-dollar marketing firm. Back as the woman who bought her first office with cash she earned herself, who built campaigns that turned local businesses into regional chains, who now consults for Fortune 500 brands. Back as the mother of Ava, my beautiful, stubborn, brilliant 5-year-old daughter who is currently tugging my sleeve, asking if we could get ice cream before driving to Grandma and Grandpa's house. She doesn't know. She doesn't know that the people she calls Grandma and Grandpa threw her mother away like trash 11 years ago. She doesn't know that when she was born, I promised myself she would never feel unloved or controlled the way I did growing up. She doesn't know that this jet, this company, this life I built, all of it was driven by the memory of standing in the rain, terrified but free thinking. I will never let anyone decide my future again. As we walked down the small stairway from the plane onto the hot tarmac, the pilot nodded at me with quiet respect. I paused for a moment, breathing in the humid summer air, letting the reality sink in. I was really here? I had returned to the town that once tried to break me, but this time I was unbreakable. I looked down at Ava. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, her eyes squinting against the sun as she looked around curiously. "Are we going to Grandma's house now, Mommy?" she asked. I smiled softly. "Yes, baby, we're going to see Grandma and Grandpa. But first, How about we pick up some ice cream on the way? She squealed in delight, and for a moment, I let myself just be her mom, not the CEO, not the daughter cast out, not the girl with something to prove. Just her mom holding her hand on a hot summer morning. But as I buckled her into her car seat and climbed into the sleek black Audi rental waiting for us, I caught my reflection in the tinted window. I saw the woman I had become, strong, resilient, unwilling to bend for anyone ever again. And I whispered to myself, "This is it. This is your moment. Let them see exactly who you are now." I started the engine and pulled out of the airport, ready to drive back into the past that made me and show them that I didn't just survive their rejection. I thrived. I grew up in a house where silence was the safest sound. Our 2-story colonial on Hawthorne Lane looked perfect from the outside. The white shutters were freshly painted every spring, the flower beds were always in bloom, and the lawn never dared to grow half an inch too long. Neighbors would smile and nod as they walked past, whispering to each other about what a beautiful family the Rosses were. But inside those walls, perfection came at a cost. My mother, Judith Ross, ruled our home with an iron fist hidden inside a designer leather glove. She was beautiful in the way statues are beautiful, flawless, cold, unyielding. Her auburn hair was always styled into a smooth, sculpted bob that never moved, not even when she yelled. And she yelled a lot. "Stand up straight, Hannah." She would snap if I dared to slouch, pressing 2 sharp fingers into the base of my spine. "Don't drag your feet when you walk." A proper young lady glides. She was obsessed with appearances. Every morning before school, she would lay out my clothes on the bed, pastel cardigans, floral dresses with lace collars, little pearl earrings that pinched my earlobes. If I tried to wear jeans and a t-shirt, she would stand in the doorway, arms crossed, eyebrows arched so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "You're not leaving this house dressed like a farmer's daughter," she'd say. "Do you want people thinking we can't afford to dress you properly?" It didn't matter that we lived in a suburban Pennsylvania neighborhood where everyone's dad was an accountant or a dentist, and everyone's mom hosted charity luncheons at the country club. It didn't matter that I got straight A's, tutored other kids in math, and volunteered at the library on weekends. None of that was enough. Because in my mother's eyes, enough didn't exist. There was always something more I needed to fix, to polish, to erase. My father, Peter Ross, was a quiet man with gentle eyes that never quite met mine. He worked long hours as an accountant at a respected local firm. When he was home, he mostly sat in his recliner, reading financial journals, nodding along to whatever my mother said. Sometimes when her criticisms of me cut particularly deep, he would glance up from his reading, catch my eye, and offer a small apologetic smile as if to say, "I know, but I can't help you." Those moments hurt worse than her words. At least she was honest about her disdain. My father, he just let it happen. By the time I turned 15, my mother and I were locked in near constant battle. I wanted to join the debate team. She wanted me in cotillion classes. I applied for a part-time job at the local bookstore. She tore up the application in front of me, insisting volunteering at her charity events would look better on my college resume. I started wearing jeans to school and changing into the dresses she chose when I got home, just to avoid another screaming match. "You're embarrassing the family with these rebellious phases," she would say, through clenched teeth, smiling brightly in case a neighbor was watching through the window. "Why can't you be more like Caroline Johnson?" Her mother says she's already dating the son of a state senator. Dinner was the worst. Every evening, we sat at the polished oak table under the chandelier, eating in near silence except for my mother's critiques. "Don't hunch over your plate. You chew too loudly. Your grades are slipping. They're all A's, all A's, and 1 A-. It's slipping." My father would keep his eyes on his fork, scooping up mashed potatoes as though they were the most fascinating thing in the world. "Listen to your mother, Hannah," he'd mumble if I dared to defend myself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him to yell, "Why won't you stand up for me?" But I didn't, because in our house, silence was safer than the alternative. As I got older, the rules got stricter. I wasn't allowed to sleep over at friends' houses. I wasn't allowed to date. I wasn't allowed to choose my own classes. Every decision had to go through my mother's filter of what was proper, what was respectable, what would make her look good at the next country club brunch. Sometimes I would lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me and wonder what it would feel like to be free. To go to sleep without worrying what I would be criticized for in the morning. To wake up and just be myself. I started hiding pieces of who I was. My college brochures were tucked under my mattress. My journal was hidden in the lining of an old purse in my closet. Even my dreams felt dangerous under her roof. But there was one thing I never hid: my determination. No matter how many times she told me I was ungrateful or selfish, no matter how many times my father averted his gaze while she tore me down, I held on to the quiet, burning certainty that I was meant for something more than this life she had planned for me, even if I didn't know exactly what it was yet. By the time I turned 17, my mother's obsession with my future shifted from college applications to wedding plans. It started subtly casual comments about how Caroline Johnson was already dating the senator's son, or how Emily Baker's parents were arranging for her to meet the heir of a major construction company. At first, I ignored it. I thought I still have time. I thought she can't force me into marriage. But that was before Marcus Hale came into our lives. Marcus was 33, recently divorced, and the only son of Richard Hale, owner of Hale Sons Realty, which basically owned half the town. His family had moved into a sprawling brick mansion on the edge of our neighborhood, and overnight my mother became obsessed with befriending them. Suddenly, our Sunday brunch reservations were switched to the country club where the Hales dined. Our grocery trips somehow aligned with Mrs. Hale's shopping schedule. My mother even started volunteering at the same charity board Marcus's mother chaired, wearing her best pearl earrings every meeting. The first time I met Marcus was at a fundraising dinner for the local children's hospital. I remember feeling awkward in my powder blue chiffon dress tugging at the too tight waistline as my mother whispered, "Stand up straight. Don't fidget. Smile more. And for God's sake, stop biting your lip like a nervous child." Marcus approached our table with a glass of scotch in his hand and a smile that didn't quite reach his pale blue eyes. He was handsome in a magazine cover way, strong jawline, slicked back dark hair, tailored navy suit hugging his athletic build. Every mom at that event probably fantasized about marrying their daughter off to him. But when he shook my hand, his grip was too tight. His thumb lingering against my wrist longer than necessary, and a chill crawled up my spine. "Hannah Wright," he said, his gaze sweeping over me in a way that made my skin prickle. "Your mother's told me so much about you." I forced a polite smile, but inside my stomach twisted. That night on the ride home, my mother gushed. "Marcus is so mature for his age," she said. "He's established, successful, and from an impeccable family. You'd be lucky to catch his attention." "He's 15 years older than me, Mom," I whispered. She glared at me through the rearview mirror. "Don't be childish. Marriage isn't about age. It's about security." Over the next few months, Marcus became a frequent guest at our house. Sometimes he'd drop by after work to chat with my father about investments, but always made sure to linger in the kitchen while I did homework at the counter. He'd stand behind me close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive but suffocating, and comment on my schoolwork. "Marketing and business," he'd say with a smirk. "Smart girl, though you won't need a career once you're married." He started bringing small gifts: a leather-bound journal, a silver necklace with a sapphire pendant. I never wore them, leaving the boxes unopened on my dresser. One evening, he brought tickets to a gala in the city. My mother practically squealed with delight. "This is it. she whispered as she zipped me into a wine-red gown that revealed more cleavage than I was comfortable with. He's going to propose tonight. Don't ruin this, Hannah. That dinner was the longest night of my life. Marcus spent the entire meal with his hand possessively resting on my knee under the table, leaning in too close as he spoke about his company's expansion plans and how he needed a wife who could host events and look pretty for clients. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, he would cut me off with a condescending smile and a dismissive, "That's sweet, but this is business, darling." But what pushed the night from suffocating to horrifying was what happened after dessert. As guests began dancing, Marcus led me onto the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The air was crisp with early fall chill, the sounds of jazz music floating through the open doors behind us. He turned to me, swirling the last of his scotch in his glass, and said, "Your mother and I have been talking." My throat tightened. Talking about what? He smiled a slow, predatory smile that made my blood run cold. About our future. "I've already spoken to your father about dowry arrangements. You'll finish high school this year, then we can marry next spring. There's a lovely estate in Virginia I'm planning to purchase. You'll love it there, plenty of room to raise children." I felt like the world was tilting. My chest burned with rage and terror. "You spoke to my parents about dowry arrangements, like I'm some piece of property for sale." His expression darkened. He set his glass down on the balcony ledge and stepped closer, caging me against the railing. "Don't be dramatic. This is what's best for you. Your mother says you're rebellious, but I can fix that. You just need a strong hand." Then he reached out and brushed my hair back behind my ear, his fingers grazing my neck, lingering too long. I froze fear, locking every muscle in my body. In that moment, I knew if I married him, he would own me, control me, destroy everything inside me that still felt alive. "Don't worry, Hannah," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. "You'll learn to love me. All good wives do." That night, lying awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my decision crystallized. I would rather sleep on park benches and eat from trash cans than spend my life trapped under Marcus Hale's thumb. I would not become my mother's perfect doll wife. I would not let him ruin me. What I didn't know then was how high the price of freedom would be, and how it would take every ounce of strength I had to pay it. After that night on the balcony with Marcus, everything changed inside me. My fear hardened into resolve. I couldn't eat for days every time I smelled my mother's lavender candles or heard Marcus's name. My stomach twisted into knots. But beneath the fear was something fierce, a small ember of defiance that refused to go out. Late at night, when the house was silent and only the ticking grandfather clock echoed through the halls, I would lie in bed staring at the glow in the dark stars I had stuck to my ceiling as a child. Each plastic star reminded me there was a world beyond these four walls, a world I had barely tasted. During those nights, I began researching colleges obsessively on my old cracked laptop. Business programs in California, marketing programs in New York, entrepreneurship, scholarships in Chicago. Every brochure I ordered arrived in plain envelopes that I smuggled up to my room, hiding them inside the lining of an old suitcase under my bed. I memorized tuition fees, scholarship deadlines, application requirements. I practiced writing personal statements until my fingers ached. Every night I whispered to myself, "You are not staying here. You will not marry Marcus Hale. You will build your own life." I knew I couldn't ask my parents for application fees. They would never approve. So I babysat after school, lying to my mother that I was volunteering at the library. I saved every dollar in an envelope labeled Freedom Money and hid it behind the loose panel in my closet wall. Then came the acceptance letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, the envelope thick with promise. I ripped it open in the upstairs bathroom with trembling hands. The words blurred with tears, as I read congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission to the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley. I sank to the cold tile floor and sobbed into my knees. For the first time, the future felt real. A future I had built myself with no help from my parents or Marcus or anyone else who wanted to control me. But that same evening, as I hid the acceptance letter in my desk drawer under a stack of calculus worksheets, my mother called me downstairs. "We're having a special dinner this Saturday," she announced, her voice sugary sweet in a way that made my skin crawl. "The Hales will be joining us. Marcus has something important to discuss." Her eyes gleamed with triumph. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father shifted uncomfortably in his armchair but said nothing. All week my mother treated me like a prized show pony. She took me to her hair salon for a blowout, forced me to try on dress after dress until she settled on a navy blue sheath that made me feel like I was wearing someone else's skin. She even complimented my posture at dinner on Friday, a rare moment of approval that felt like poison in my veins. Saturday came too quickly. That morning, I locked myself in my room and pulled out my acceptance letter. I ran my fingers over the embossed Berkeley seal, trying to memorize the feeling. I whispered to it, like a prayer, "I will not let them take this from me." As evening fell, the house filled with the smell of rosemary roast and garlic mashed potatoes. My mother set the dining table with the good china polishing each fork and knife until it gleamed under the chandelier light. My father hovered in the kitchen, silent, adjusting his tie over and over. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. My heart thudded against my ribcage as Marcus and his parents stepped inside. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a small black velvet box in his hand. Our eyes met across the room. His smile sent a chill down my spine. Dinner was torture. The conversation floated around business mergers and charity events, everyone ignoring the tension coiling in my chest like a viper ready to strike. Marcus's hand rested on the table, fingers drumming lightly against the velvet box. Every tap felt like a countdown to my doom. Finally, after dessert, Marcus's father raised his glass. "I believe we've come to the true purpose of tonight's dinner," he said, his voice warm and booming. My mother's smile stretched so wide it looked painful. She clasped her hands together and turned to me. "Hannah, darling, pay attention." Marcus stood and walked around the table, stopping beside me. As he dropped to one knee, the room seemed to tilt. My pulse roared in my ears. He flipped open the box, revealing a massive diamond ring that glittered like an accusation. "Hannah Ross," he said, his voice smooth and confident, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Time froze. I saw my mother's face alight with triumph. My father's gaze locked on his empty plate. Marcus stared at me with eyes that said, "I own you now." And I knew. I knew if I said yes, I would die, not physically, but every piece of me that still dreamed, still hoped, still burned to live life on my own terms, would wither and vanish forever. "I need some air," I whispered, my voice trembling as I pushed back from the table. I fled through the French doors to the backyard, gulping the cold spring air. My chest heaved with silent sobs as tears blurred the moonlit lawn. A minute later, footsteps crunched on the flagstone path behind me. Marcus's shadow stretched long across the patio. That wasn't the response I was expecting, he said, his voice tight with anger. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I managed, wiping my tears with shaking fingers. "But this is all so sudden. We barely know each other." He scoffed. "Don't be naive, Hannah. This has been planned for months. Your mother promised you'd be on board. She assured me you wouldn't cause problems." "Planned?" My voice broke. "What about what I want?" His eyes narrowed. "Your mother knows what's best for you. And so do I." I took a step back as he reached for me. My heart thundered. In that moment, I saw my entire life, the mansion in Virginia, the dinner parties where I'd smile prettily and stay silent, the children raised to obey without question, my dreams rotting away in the attic of some beautiful prison. And something inside me snapped. No, I said, my voice rising with power I didn't know I had. I won't marry you. His face darkened, a vein pulsing in his temple. You will regret this, Hannah Ross, I promise you. He stormed back into the house, leaving me shaking under the moonlight. But for the first time in my life, the fear didn't win, because in that moment, saying no felt like freedom, like the first breath after drowning, like the spark of a match in total darkness. And I knew whatever price I had to pay for my choice, it would be worth it. Because that was the night I chose myself over everything they wanted me to be. I stood outside on the patio for what felt like hours, staring up at the moon as tears dried on my cheeks. My chest burned with adrenaline and defiance, but beneath that was fear, a gnawing, relentless fear of what would happen next. Finally, I wiped my face, took a shaky breath, and walked back inside. The dining room felt colder than before. The chandelier lights were too bright, illuminating every tense expression around the table. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead like I wasn't even there. His parents whispered furiously to each other, sneaking glances at me with thinly veiled disgust. My mother's smile was gone, her lips pressed into a flat, furious line. My father sat slumped in his chair, eyes fixed on his untouched coffee cup, as if hoping it would swallow him whole. The silence pressed down on me like the roof was caving in. Mrs. Hale stood abruptly. Well, she said, her voice dripping with contempt, I think we've wasted enough of our time tonight. Her husband nodded sharply. Come along, Marcus. We have better things to do than coddle childish tantrums. Marcus rose, not sparing me a glance. As they gathered their coats, my mother scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with panic. Please, Elaine, Richard, she pleaded. She just needs time. She'll come around. Hannah, apologize right now. I stood frozen, my hands trembling at my sides. I looked at Marcus. His expression was stone. His cold blue eyes flicked to me, once full of fury and promise, a promise that he would make me pay for this humiliation. Without a word, he turned and walked out the door. As the sound of their car faded down the driveway, the silence in the dining room grew unbearable. My mother slowly turned to me, her face pale with rage. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then in a voice so low it made my skin crawl, she said, What have you done? I swallowed hard. I told him no. I don't want to marry him. Her hand shot out so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap cracked across my cheek, snapping my head to the side. For a moment, the world blurred as pain radiated through my face. When I looked back at her, her eyes were wild. You ungrateful little girl, she spat. Do you have any idea what you've just thrown away? Marcus Hale is your future. He is our future. Do you think your father's job is so secure that we can afford to insult the Hales like this? I pressed my palm against my burning cheek. I don't care about his money. I don't care about any of it. I want to go to college. I want to build my own life. College, she screeched. You think Berkeley will make you a better match than Marcus. You think a degree makes you worth something. Marriage is what gives a woman status. Hannah, not some useless piece of paper from California. I felt something inside me harden. I'd rather be worthless and free than be his wife. My mother stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Then her face twisted with disgust. Get out! I blinked. What? Get out of my house. She whispered, her voice shaking with cold fury. If you're too good for the life we've given you, then go. See how far your stubbornness gets you. My chest tightened. Mom, please. Pack your things, she said, turning away from me. You're no daughter of mine. I looked desperately at my father. He still hadn't moved. Dad, I whispered. Slowly he raised his eyes to meet mine. There was so much sadness in them, so much regret, but also emptiness. He reached into his wallet and pulled out 3 crisp $100 bills. He pressed them into my hand, his fingers lingering for half a second before he let go. "This is all I can do," he murmured. "I'm sorry, Hannah." Tears blurred my vision as I looked at him, waiting for him to stand up to fight for me to say anything. But he just sat there staring down at his hands. That was the moment my heart truly broke. I climbed the stairs on shaking legs, my cheeks still throbbing where she had hit me. In my room, I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush deodorant, my phone charger, and, most importantly, the Berkeley acceptance letter. I stood in the middle of my room, looking around at the posters on my walls, the string lights above my desk, the stack of novels on my nightstand. Everything I'd ever known was in this room, but I couldn't stay. Staying meant surrendering. As I zipped up my backpack, I whispered to myself, "You're going to be okay. You're going to get out. You're going to live." When I came back downstairs, my mother was nowhere to be seen. My father stood by the front door, shoulders hunched. "It's raining," he said softly. I shrugged, blinking back tears. "I've walked in worse." He opened the door. The night air was cold and smelled like wet asphalt. I stepped out onto the porch, the rain immediately soaking through my dress. I paused, hoping for something, a hug, a goodbye, and "I love you." But there was nothing, just silence. As I walked down the driveway into the night rain pounding against my skin, I didn't look back. Because I knew if I did, I might run back inside and beg them to take me back. And I wasn't going to beg for a life that would kill me from the inside out. I walked to the edge of the neighborhood, my backpack heavy on my shoulders, water dripping from my hair, my shoes squelching with each step. I sat down at a bus stop, shivering, my cheeks still stinging from her slap. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the screen lighting up with a text from Sophia. "Hey, everything okay?" I stared at it for a long time before typing back with trembling fingers. "Can you come get me? I have nowhere else to go." Sophia's headlights cut through the rain like a promise. I sat hunched on the cold metal bench at the bus stop, soaked to the bone, hugging my backpack to my chest like a shield. My cheeks still burned where my mother had slapped me. Every passing car sprayed water onto the sidewalk, and I flinched each time as if expecting another blow. I heard him before I saw him, heavy boots slapping against the wet pavement, a drunken, slurred voice echoing under the orange streetlights. "Hey, pretty girl, what are you doing out here all alone at night?" I didn't look up. I tightened my grip on my backpack, praying he would just keep walking. But his footsteps grew louder, uneven, until he stopped in front of me. I smelled stale beer and cigarettes before. I saw his face, scruffy beard, bloodshot eyes, a torn Eagles hoodie clinging to his thin frame. "You got a phone I can use, pretty girl?" he asked, swaying slightly as rain dripped off his hood. When I didn't answer, he leaned closer and his breath hit my cheek, sour and sharp. "Don't ignore me, bitch." My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my teeth. I glanced down the street, hoping to see Sophia's car, but the road was empty except for passing headlights that didn't slow down. The man's eyes flicked to my backpack. "What's in there, huh?" His voice turned mocking. "Run away from home or something." I swallowed, tasting bile. "Please leave me alone." He chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "Ah, don't be like that." His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist in a vice grip. I yelped, trying to pull away, but his fingers dug into my skin. "Let go of me." Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating his sneer as he yanked me to my feet. My backpack slipped off my shoulder and fell into a puddle. I stumbled, my sneakers sliding on the wet sidewalk. "Let her go." The scream cut through the storm like a siren. Headlights blinded both of us as Sophia's Civic screeched to a halt by the curb. She leapt out into the rain without even closing her car door, rage blazing in her dark eyes. I said, "Let her go." she yelled again, voice shaking with fury. The man flinched, startled, and released my wrist. I stumbled back against the bus stop pole, clutching my bruised arm. Sophia grabbed my backpack from the puddle and shoved it into my chest. "Get in the car," she ordered. The man took a step toward her, eyes narrowing. "Mind your business, bitch." Sophia didn't move. Her voice dropped low and deadly calm. "I'm calling the cops right now. Take one more step and you'll spend the night in county jail." He glared at her, then spat on the sidewalk, rain splashing around his boots. "Fuck you both," he slurred before staggering away down the block, disappearing into the storm. For a moment, the only sounds were the pounding rain on the Civic's roof and my ragged breathing. Then Sophia turned to me, her face softening. "Oh my God, Hannah," she whispered. She grabbed my shoulders and pulled me into a hug so tight I thought I might break. But it felt good to break in her arms. "Safe. Come on," she said, guiding me to the car. "Let's get you out of here." I climbed into the passenger seat, dripping rainwater onto the fabric seats. My teeth chattered so hard I couldn't speak. Sophia slammed her door shut, cranked up the heater, and peeled away from the curb tires, squealing on the wet asphalt. As she drove, she glanced over at me, taking in my soaked hair plastered to my face, my torn wrist where his fingernails had scraped me, the faraway look in my eyes. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Tears spilled silently down my cheeks, mingling with the rainwater still dripping from my chin. Just drive. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. She parked in front of her house and helped me inside, one arm wrapped firmly around my shoulders. The warmth of her living room wrapped around me like a blanket. Mrs. Carter appeared in her robe, eyes widening when she saw my state. "Oh, honey," she murmured, guiding me to the bathroom. "Take a hot shower. I'll set up the couch for you." Under the steaming water, I scrubbed every inch of my skin, trying to wash off the smell of beer, cigarettes, fear, and shame. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, his grip still burned on my wrist, and my mother's slap still throbbed against my cheek. When I came out, hair dripping and wrapped in one of Sophia's oversized sweatshirts, Mrs. Carter had laid out blankets and a pillow on the couch. She handed me a mug of chamomile tea with trembling hands. "You're safe here, sweetheart," she said softly, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "Sleep. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." That night, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, its shadow dancing across the living room walls. Sophia curled up in the recliner nearby, refusing to leave me alone. The storm outside raged on thunder, rattling the windows, but inside it was quiet. For the first time in my life, I realized that quiet didn't have to mean fear. It could mean peace. And as I drifted off to sleep, exhausted and aching, I promised myself that one day I would create a life where no one could ever make me feel that helpless again. Morning came too soon. I woke to the smell of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in the kitchen. For a moment, I lay there on Sophia's couch, wrapped in her old high school marching band blanket, staring at the ceiling and wondering if everything that had happened was just a nightmare. But the soreness in my cheek where my mother slapped me and the bruises on my wrist from that man's grip told me it was all real. I sat up wincing as my back protested against the lumpy couch cushions. Sophia appeared in the doorway, hair in a messy bun, wearing her pajama shorts and an oversized Penn State sweatshirt. She held out a mug of coffee to me. "Here," she said softly. "It's got extra cream and sugar. Just how you like it." "Thanks," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying the night before. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting its warmth seep into my shaking fingers. Mrs. Carter insisted I eat breakfast before leaving for her nursing shift. She kissed my forehead before she walked out the door. "You're staying here as long as you need, okay? No arguments." After she left, Sophia sat cross-legged on the couch beside me. "So what's the plan?" "Hannah," I stared down at the steam rising from my coffee. "I don't know. I admitted. I have Berkeley, but no scholarship, no money. I'm stuck. Sophia frowned, her brows knitting together. You're not stuck. You're paused. There's a difference. Her words planted a tiny seed of hope in my chest, but it felt like hope I couldn't afford. That day I put on jeans and a t-shirt she lent me and walked 3 miles to the nearest strip mall. I handed out resumes to every store, the coffee shop, the craft store, the grocery store, even a sketchy payday loan place, just for the hell of it. The coffee shop called me back first. They needed an opening barista, someone who could be there at 5 a.m. sharp. Minimum wage plus tips. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Denise with a dragon tattoo curling around her neck, handed me a green apron after a 2-minute interview. Start tomorrow, she barked. Don't be late. That night, lying on Sophia's couch, I stared at my phone screen glowing in the dark. I pulled up my Berkeley acceptance letter again, rereading it for the 1,000th time. My chest ached with longing so deep it felt like grief. I set my alarm for 3:45 a.m. The next morning, I woke before dawn, dressed in borrowed black jeans and tied my hair into a neat ponytail. I walked the mile to the coffee shop in the darkness, streetlights flickering overhead. The early shift was brutal. The espresso machine sputtered and hissed, my hands burned from scalding milk, and customers barked orders at me without eye contact. By noon, my feet throbbed and my arms ached from scrubbing counters. My tips jar held $7.43, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. In the afternoons, I enrolled in classes at the local community college, using my Berkeley acceptance as proof of high school graduation. I took Intro to Business English Comp and an evening course in marketing principles. Tuition was cheaper, and I paid out of pocket, using every penny from babysitting and coffee tips. My days blurred into a punishing cycle: wake before dawn, work until midday classes, until evening, babysitting on weekends, collapse onto Sophia's couch for a few hours of sleep before doing it all over again. I was exhausted. I was hungry most days, but I was free. 3 months later, on a rainy Wednesday morning, I spilled a caramel latte all over a customer's white silk blouse. My hand shook as I apologized, over and over grabbing napkins to dab at the stain spreading across her chest. "It's fine," she said sharply, waving me away. But then her eyes softened when she saw my trembling fingers. "Rough day, rough few months," I admitted with a tired smile. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her leather tote bag and pulled out a business card. "My name is Elaine Carter," she said. "I'm the marketing director for Carson & Associates downtown. We have an opening for a junior admin. No experience required, but it's fast-paced and demands someone smart who can think on their feet." My mouth fell open. I don't have a degree yet." She smiled. "You'll be answering phones and managing files. Degree isn't required, but drive is. And you've got that. Call me if you're interested." I held that card all day like a lifeline. That night, after finishing my homework at the kitchen table, while Sophia watched Netflix beside me, I Googled Carson & Associates. They were a mid-sized marketing firm with local and regional clients, real estate agencies, small banks, bakeries, nonprofits. They weren't a Fortune 500 company, but they were a start. The next morning before my coffee shift, I emailed Elaine. By that afternoon, she replied with an interview slot for the next day. I almost cried when I saw her response. But instead, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "This is it. This is your chance." I borrowed one of Sophia's blazers and black slacks that were 2 inches too short. I tied my hair back, applied minimal makeup, and practiced my answers to typical interview questions in the bathroom mirror until midnight. The interview was terrifying. Elaine's office was sleek and smelled like expensive candles. She asked me about my strengths, my weaknesses, my 5-year plan. My voice shook as I explained my dream of working in marketing and someday running my own firm. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pen against her notepad. Then she looked up at me, her eyes warm but piercing. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said. "The job is yours if you want it." I swallowed hard, tears burning behind my eyes. "I want it. Good." She smiled and stood extending her hand. "Welcome to Carson Associates." That afternoon, I walked out into the crisp autumn air, my thin blazer whipping in the wind, the business card still clutched in my hand like a golden ticket. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of what life could look like if I kept fighting. A life built on my own terms. A life where I didn't belong to anyone but myself. Working at Carson Associates was like stepping into an entirely different world. On my first day, I walked into the sleek glass building wearing a secondhand blazer that still smelled faintly of mothballs. My heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. Elaine greeted me at the reception desk with her usual calm, confident smile. "This is Hannah Ross," she told the team. "She's our new junior admin. Treat her well." I spent the first few weeks answering phones, scheduling meetings, making coffee runs, and organizing files so scattered they could have belonged to a conspiracy theorist. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't strategizing million-dollar campaigns or pitching to clients, but every time I stapled documents together or typed up minutes from a meeting, I listened. I watched. I learned. At lunch, instead of scrolling on my phone, I sat in the conference room watching webinars about social media marketing trends. After work, I took night classes at community college, poring over textbooks until my eyes burned. On weekends, I read case studies about companies that went from local shops to national brands. I filled an entire notebook with ideas, logos, taglines, campaign structures for companies that didn't even exist yet. Elaine noticed. One Friday afternoon, about 6 months in, she stopped by my desk holding a stack of papers. "What do you think of these?" she asked casually. I blinked. "Me? Yes, you." She placed them on my desk. "It's the upcoming campaign proposal for a local bakery. You've been watching and learning for months now. Tell me what's missing." My hand shook as I flipped through the pages. I saw outdated hashtags, generic taglines, and visuals that looked like clip art from 2005. I swallowed my fear and said, "It feels stale, like it's trying too hard to sound perfect instead of authentic. People don't want perfection, they want connection." Elaine's lips twitched in the hint of a smile. "Rewrite the social copy by Monday. Let's see what you can do." That weekend, I barely slept. I spent 12 hours straight on Saturday researching bakery trends, viral Instagram reels, aesthetic color palettes, and customer pain points. I wrote 30 different captions and revised them all. On Monday morning, I slid my notes onto Elaine's desk with trembling fingers. She didn't say anything at first. She read every word carefully, eyes darting back and forth across the pages. When she finished, she set them down and looked at me. "You have good instincts," she said simply. "We're using your copy. For the first time in my life, someone saw my ideas not as rebellion or arrogance, but as valuable." My chest felt like it might burst. 2 weeks later, the campaign launched. Within a month, the bakery's foot traffic increased by 300%. The owner was so thrilled he sent us boxes of fresh croissants every Friday for a year. After that, Elaine started pulling me into more meetings. I still scheduled conference rooms and fetched coffee, but now I also took notes on client calls, drafted strategy outlines, and managed their social media calendars. The hours were long, the pay was still entry level, but every task felt like a stepping stone to something bigger. 18 months later, Elaine called me into her office. I sat nervously across from her, trying to read her expression. "I'm promoting you to marketing assistant," she said. "More responsibility, higher pay, and direct client work. You've earned this." I almost burst into tears. That small raise meant I could finally move out of Sophia's living room and into my own studio apartment, a shabby place above a laundromat with roaches the size of thumbtacks, but it was mine. I bought a $40 secondhand table from Facebook Marketplace and a twin mattress off Craigslist. I worked 60-hour weeks, studied at night, and paid my rent 1 week late every month. But each morning when I woke to the hum of washing machines below and the smell of fresh laundry drifting up through the vents, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. Because every day I walked into Carson Associates was a reminder I wasn't that girl on the porch anymore, soaked in rain and rejection. I was building something, a life, a career, a future no one could take from me. 3 years into working under Elaine, after countless late nights campaign successes and a promotion to junior marketing strategist, she called me into her office again. I thought I was about to be scolded for missing an email thread, but instead she closed the door behind me, sat across from me and said, "Hannah, you've outgrown us." My stomach dropped. "Wait, are you firing me?" She laughed. "No, I'm telling you, it's time to build your own agency." I stared at her, stunned. With what money Elaine, my savings account has $1,304.19, and that's only because my rent check hasn't been cashed yet. She opened a drawer, pulled out a check, and slid it across the table. It was made out to me. For $50,000, I gaped at her. "I can't take this. You can and you will," she said firmly. "This isn't charity. It's an investment. I want 15% equity in whatever you build." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at her, this woman who had gone from stranger to mentor to family. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because I see the way you think," she said softly. "You don't just want to sell products. You want to change the way businesses connect with people. And that's the future of marketing." The next week, I registered Hannah Ross Marketing as an LLC. I rented a 200-square-foot office in a co-working space downtown. My desk was a folding table, my chair squeaked when I moved, and my first laptop was so old the battery only lasted 45 minutes off charger. But it was mine. For 6 months, I took any client I could find, plumbers, local boutiques, a candle maker who paid me in scented candles, and $200 checks that bounced twice before clearing. I worked 18-hour days handling strategy, design, copywriting, client calls, invoicing, and bookkeeping all by myself. I cried in the bathroom more times than I could count. 2 clients canceled within my first quarter, nearly sinking me before I had even begun. But I kept going. Because every night as I packed up my folding table desk and flicked off the buzzing fluorescent light above me, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." And I was right, because Hannah Ross Marketing was about to become something so much bigger than I ever imagined. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was running on 3 hours of sleep after pulling an all-nighter to finish a rebranding proposal for a local fitness studio. My eyes burned as I sipped stale coffee from my chipped mug, rereading my presentation slides for the 10th time, praying I didn't accidentally write "Get Ripped Fast" on the logo concept instead of the tagline page. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my client walked in, but he wasn't alone. Trailing behind the studio owner was a man I'd never met, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark, curly hair and a 5 o'clock shadow. He wore a crisp white button-down tucked into slate gray dress pants sleeves, rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms dusted with hair. His eyes were the color of bourbon, warm and deep, and when he smiled politely at me, dimples creased both cheeks. The owner introduced him as Daniel Hayes, saying he was consulting with them on expanding their corporate wellness partnerships. Daniel extended his hand, greeting me with a firm but gentle handshake and a warm, "Nice to meet you, Hannah." For a split second, the exhaustion fell away, replaced by a flutter I hadn't felt in years. The meeting lasted an hour. Daniel asked thoughtful questions about brand voice, community engagement, and positioning strategy. Unlike most men I'd encountered in business, he didn't interrupt or try to mansplain my own pitch back to me. He listened, really listened, nodding along, jotting down notes, occasionally smiling when I cracked a sarcastic joke about outdated fitness trends like lemon water detoxes. After the meeting, as we packed up, he lingered by the door and softly told me he really liked my approach to customer connection, that most agencies just talked about conversions and upsells, but I focused on relationships, and that was rare. I felt heat creep up my neck as I thanked him, trying to sound casual, saying I thought people buy from brands they trust, not brands that yell at them the loudest. He chuckled, his dimples deepening, and simply said, "Exactly." For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about him, which was ridiculous. I didn't have time for romance. My company was still clawing its way out of survival mode. Love wasn't part of my business plan, but fate apparently didn't care about my schedule. 2 weeks later, I ran into him again at a networking event hosted by a local business accelerator. I wore my only tailored blazer, navy blue with slightly frayed cuffs, and had my hair in a sleek bun. He was standing by the bar nursing an old-fashioned, scanning the room like he was searching for someone. I teased him, asking if he was looking for another agency to interrogate. His face lit up as he said my name, telling me he was actually hoping I'd be there. My chest fluttered when I asked why, and with quiet confidence, he admitted he'd like to take me out sometime on an actual date if I'd let him. I blinked, stunned, into silence, my brain scrambling for excuses, deadlines, invoices, client calls, staff payroll, but instead I heard myself say, "I'd like that." Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown, tucked between a pawn shop and an art gallery. The lighting was dim, the tablecloths were real linen, and the waitress called everyone sweetheart in a gravelly smoker's voice. We talked for hours about everything: childhood dreams, favorite movies, his love of obscure documentaries about tree frogs, my obsession with bad reality TV as stress relief. He told me about starting his corporate wellness consulting company after leaving a toxic sales job. I told him about being kicked out at 18 and building my agency from scratch. At one point, he reached across the table and gently took my hand in his thumb, stroking circles over my knuckles, telling me I was incredible. I shook my head, tears pricking behind my eyelids, admitting I was just trying. He smiled softly and told me trying was everything. Our relationship unfolded with the same quiet confidence he carried everywhere. He never tried to dim my ambition. When I pulled another all-nighter for a client pitch, he showed up at 2 a.m. with fresh coffee and a bag of warm chocolate chip cookies. When my first major client contract fell through and I cried on my office floor, he sat beside me, rubbing my back, reminding me that one failed deal didn't define me. He fell in love with every part of me, even the messy parts I tried to hide: my anxiety, spirals, my fear of abandonment, my stubborn independence that sometimes crossed into self-destruction. He held space for it all, never demanding I soften to fit his comfort. The night I told him about Marcus, about the proposal, the slap, the rejection, he didn't flinch. He just pulled me into his chest and whispered that I never had to fight alone again. 2 years into our relationship, we were eating takeout on the floor of my living room, surrounded by campaign drafts and unopened mail. My hair was in a bun, sweatpants stained with printer ink. He set down his chopsticks, brushed a stray noodle off my cheek, and told me he loved me. I smiled sleepily, saying I knew. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. My breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band. No diamonds, no frills, just solid, honest gold. His voice trembled as he said he didn't need a big wedding or an expensive ring. He just wanted to spend his life with me, building whatever crazy dreams came next, and asked if I'd marry him. Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, saying yes, God, yes. That night, as he held me in his arms, his chest rising and falling against my back, I realized something. This wasn't the marriage my mother planned for me. This wasn't a transaction or an arrangement to secure family status. This was love. Real, honest, imperfect love. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. When Ava turned 5, everything changed. One evening, as Daniel cooked dinner, Ava crawled onto my lap and asked softly, "Mommy, why don't I have grandparents like Zoe?" Her innocent question hit me like a punch to the chest. Memories I'd buried for years came flooding back my mother's slap. The pouring rain, my father's silence as they threw me out for refusing Marcus. That night, I sat on the patio staring at the moonlit yard. Daniel joined me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You don't have to see them," he whispered. "But maybe I do," I said quietly, "for Ava and for me." Weeks later, when our company planned its next office expansion, Pennsylvania appeared on the shortlist. The data made sense, but my decision wasn't about numbers. It was about closure. So we went. On the flight there, I watched Ava nap with her head on Daniel's shoulder, her hair falling over her eyes. I wondered if my parents ever watched me sleep like that. When we pulled up to my childhood home, it looked smaller than I remembered. The white shutters were chipped, the porch railing sagging slightly. I took Ava's hand and walked up the familiar path. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. I rang the doorbell. The Westminster chime echoed inside unchanged after all these years. The door opened to reveal my father. His hair was fully gray now, his shoulders stooped. "Hannah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Is that really you?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared behind him. Her face went pale as her eyes locked on mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the years between us thick with everything unspoken. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I thought it was time you met your granddaughter." I turned to Ava. "Sweetheart, say hi." She peeked out from behind my leg, her big hazel eyes curious. "Hi." My mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. My father stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please come in," he said, his voice cracking. As I crossed that threshold, Ava clutching my hand, I realized something. I wasn't that broken, rain-soaked girl anymore. I was Hannah Ross, CEO, wife, mother, and I was ready to face them, not for their approval, but for my own peace. 11. Inside, everything felt the same, and yet completely different. The floral wallpaper, the grandfather clock ticking in the hall, the faint smell of lavender and lemon polish, all unchanged. But the silence between us was heavy with 11 years of absence. My father guided us into the living room. Ava immediately spotted a crystal unicorn figurine on the coffee table and gasped softly. "It's so pretty," she whispered. My mother sat rigid on the sofa, wringing her hands. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "She's beautiful." "What's her name, Ava?" I replied shortly. Silence again. My father cleared his throat. We followed your company's growth," he said, his eyes shining with tears. He tried to blink away. "Your mother keeps every article. We're proud of you." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pushed it down. "You never called," I said quietly. "Not once." My mother flinched. I thought you hated us." "I did," I admitted. "And maybe part of me still does. But Ava deserves to know where she comes from. That doesn't mean I've forgotten what you did." My father's shoulders sagged. "I failed you," he whispered. "I should have stood up to her, to Marcus, to all of it." Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I need you both to hear this," I said firmly. "Ava will never be treated the way you treated me. She will choose her life, her path, her dreams. If you want to be part of her life, you will respect that." "Understood." My mother's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in my life, she looked small, human. I was so afraid, she whispered, voice breaking. "Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of you failing. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Hannah." The words hit me like a wave, not enough to erase the past, but enough to loosen something tight in my chest. I took a deep breath. Thank you for saying that. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. Ava crawled into my lap, looking between her grandparents curiously. Can I come back and play with the unicorn next time? She asked innocently. My mother let out a choked laugh through her tears. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly. Anytime. As we left that day, I glanced back at my parents standing together in the doorway, older and smaller than I ever remembered. I wasn't sure what the future would hold for us. Forgiveness wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. Because I had set my boundaries. I had spoken my truth. And this time, I was leaving not as their broken little girl, but as the woman I had fought so hard to become. Today, I stand in the glass-walled corner office of Ross Hayes Marketing's newest branch, the Pennsylvania branch I once thought I'd never set foot in. Outside, the city hums with life. Inside, my team bustles around strategizing campaigns for brands I once only dreamed of working with. On my desk is a framed photo, me, Daniel, and Ava at our Chicago office opening. In it, Ava is wearing her tiny Ross Hayes branded hoodie, grinning wide with her missing front teeth. Daniel has his arm wrapped around my waist, smiling at me like I'm his entire universe, and maybe I am. I think back to the 18-year-old girl who walked away from her parents' house that rainy night, soaked to the skin, clutching nothing but a backpack, an acceptance letter, and her stubborn, desperate hope. If I could speak to her now, I'd say, don't give up. The world you're walking into is terrifying and lonely, but it will shape you into a woman stronger than you ever imagined. You'll fail 1,000 small ways before you succeed. You'll cry yourself to sleep more nights than you'll ever admit. But one day, you'll wake up and realize you're living the life you once begged God for in whispers. And it's even better than you dreamed. My mother and I still speak cautiously. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. My father calls every Sunday to ask about Ava's swimming classes and tell me how proud he is of my latest campaign. And while some wounds remain tender, the anger no longer rules me. Because I didn't build my life out of spite. I built it out of hope, out of the belief that I was meant for more than being silent, small, and controlled. To anyone listening to my story today, wondering if it's worth it to walk away from what destroys you, let me tell you this. Choosing yourself will always be the hardest thing you do, but it will also be the thing that saves your life. No amount of comfort, approval, or security is worth trading your dreams or your soul. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to leave. And you are allowed to build a life so beautiful, so wild, and so unapologetically yours that the people who once doubted you will barely recognize you. My name is Hannah Ross. I am a daughter, a wife, a mother, a CEO, a survivor. And if I could do it, so can you. So tell me, what's the life you're ready to fight for next?